Hello and welcome to everyone joining this webinar. My name is Jeff Rathke. I'm the president of the American German Institute, and we are really pleased to have you with us for this presentation, which is about the role of science in the transatlantic relationship. I'm going to hand things over to my colleague, Susanne Dieper, who is the Director of Programs and Grants here at AGI. And she's going to take us through the session, introduce our speaker, and moderate the discussion that will come afterwards. So let me thank you all for being with us once again and hand the microphone over to Susanne. Susanne, please.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Welcome to everyone. I'm delighted to moderate this webinar with DAAD AGI Research Fellow Finja Augsburg today. Finja has been at AGI for about 2 months now and will present on the work she's been doing in DC related to her project on the role of scientific uncertainty in the transatlantic dialogue. When she's not in Washington, Finja is a doctoral researcher and project associate at the University of Erfurt in Germany, where she is affiliated with the Institute for Planetary Health Behavior, and where she conducts research on science communication amid socio-scientific crises. She's a communications scholar, and as such, Finja's work connects international relations and communication studies through the creation of new approaches to navigating scientific uncertainty with policy and media stakeholders. It's been a real pleasure having Finja at AGI. Hers is a crucial and very timely topic given the skepticism regarding addressing climate change, embracing a green future that we witness across the globe, particularly in the United States. The COP30 climate conference in Belém, Brazil, just came to an end with disappointing results, at least for those who advocated for a roadmap to transition away from fossil fuels and those who support climate finance for developing countries, and without participation of the United States. And since the COVID-19 pandemic, we've seen a persistent distrust in the abilities of our leaders to manage different health crises and to communicate key responses to the public. AGI actually addressed this issue a few years ago during the pandemic in a project on the importance of the transatlantic partnership in times of global crises. And I encourage everyone to go on our website and take a look at what the results from this project were. But communication is key, continues to be key in many critical areas. And I look forward to hearing about Finja's findings in her case study on the US and Germany. Finja will present for about 30 minutes, and then we'll take questions from our audience. Please do submit your questions at any time through the chat function, and I'll turn it over to Finja now.
All right. Thank you so much, Susanne, for the kind introduction. That was already such a good intro into the project, much better than I can probably do it, but I'll try it as well, and I will share the screen with all of you. While doing so, I would already like to thank AGI and also the DAAD for making this fellowship possible, and I would like to welcome everyone joining us today for this webinar. And yeah, I would like to jump right into my presentation titled De-Romanticizing Uncertainty at the Transatlantic Science Policy Interface. Over the past 2 months here in DC, I conducted a US-German case study. Right now, the focus is a little more on the US just because I was on site here in Washington, so the focus was a little bit set on that, but I will try to shed a light on Germany as well every now and then to compare where that makes sense. And I would like to get us started by looking at some screenshots that I brought with me today from very different kinds of publications directed at very different kinds of audiences. I would first like to direct our attention to the center, to the Forbes article titled "How Climate Change is Shaping the Uncertainty of Hurricane Season." As soon as I read this article, so many questions, pop up in my head that we encounter every hurricane season, of people asking how strong the impacts of the hurricanes will be on their houses, their cities, the infrastructure, how this will all play out. And that is a question that concerns the public. That is a question that usually also concerns policymakers, and that concerns science as providers of information and predictions. And now also, if we're looking more towards the bottom left corner, a Harvard publication titled "The Next Pandemic, Not If But When," also is a question that we hear from many, many countries, from society, from politics, trying to prepare for whatever is to come. But we kind of know that we will encounter situations like the pandemic we just went through again. And we all have questions towards how devastating it will be, how our lives will have to adapt again, maybe. And here again, these questions move society, move politics, and can be met with answers from science, and how these answers can look. I will dive into that a little later. But all of these screenshots tackle different issues, such as, for instance, sea level rise, climate change, extreme weather, biodiversity loss. And what these issues have in common, and I touched on that already, is that they are highly relevant for the public, relevant for policymakers, and are rooted in science. And what these issues have in common as well is that solutions to these issues are not clear-cut, are not easy to find, and are uncertain. So social scientific issues come with high degrees of scientific uncertainty. And scientific uncertainty is a concept that can be broken down into different forms that make it a little easier to understand. Gustafson and Rice, which is the conceptualization I work with, differentiate deficient uncertainty, which means that we have just a lack of evidence. We just don't know enough yet to answer a question. Then we have technical uncertainty that arises due to methodological statistical reasons, for instance, caused by sampling errors. Then we have consensus uncertainty, which many of us know when it comes to climate change. For instance, we have a group of researchers saying A, a group of researchers saying B, and science does not stand united behind one answer. We have conflicting results on a topic, ambiguous results, and navigating that can be challenging, right? And lastly, we have fundamental uncertainty, and that just means that science is ever evolving. Scientific findings may turn out to be wrong in the future. What's right today may not be right tomorrow. And what we can see with this systemization of scientific uncertainty is that science is inherently uncertain. We cannot have scientific evidence without uncertainty. So the only chance we have is to work with instead of against uncertainty, because we will never make it disappear. It will always be there. And that is something that I would like to establish as a baseline for what I will present on today, because it is important to understand that we will never get rid of this uncertainty. And the aim is to make uncertain scientific information, especially in this case about social scientific issues, usable for policymakers without provoking instrumentalization. And I'm saying that because we know from our previous experiences, from previous evidence, that scientific uncertainty can catalyze constructive but also destructive dynamics at the science policy interface, also when we're looking at the public. But right now, we're focusing on the science policy interface for this conversation today. And millennium, scientific uncertainty was seen as more of a roadblock of collaboration, something that just is almost a failure of science that makes science policy collaboration difficult. And what we've seen in, when the 2000s started up until something called COVID happened, that we all remember very well. In that time, a positive trend emerged. We got more and more tendencies towards seeing scientific uncertainty as open questions that are shared across borders, and to address those open questions on pressing issues such as climate change, a good intact national and international flow of information is necessary. Science and policy have to put their heads together, find ways to work with the uncertainty and collaborate more closely. And this is where the intermediaries come in. I will talk about intermediaries a lot today because in my interviews, I decided to speak with the people bridging this science policy gap, that have insight into science, insight into policy making, and are right in the middle where this national and international flow of information between science and policy happens. And what I am working towards is a reassessment of uncertainty, because in current times, I've come to the point that that is necessary, and I will talk about why I am convinced it is necessary. Before that, I would like to mention that not all, even if that impression might come with me talking about it, not all is bad right now at the science policy interface. We've seen some transatlantic developments that show us that not all is lost, and that we don't have to be, too critical. Or now, I mean, we should be critical, but we should not put our head into the sand and just give up, because very recently, on November 21st, South Carolina became the first US state to sign a joint declaration of intent with Germany, formalizing a new economic partnership, and with that, facilitating research collaboration through a working group that has been established for the exchange of information. I mean, obviously, this has happened under the umbrella of economic interests, but still, science seems to be on the agenda there, and the exchange of information across the Atlantic between Germany and the United States is still regarded as important. And I feel like this is a good positive note to start into what we'll be talking about next. Right now, we're living in a post-COVID reality where science is under increasing pressures. We've gone through multiple crises. We're still in multiple crises right now. We have new political administrations in Germany and the United States. Agendas have shifted, and what we see, and I have included some screenshots on the right-hand side of the slide. What we can see is that in Europe, right-wing populists are explicitly targeting science, especially when it comes to climate policy. In Germany, we just had it in the Alternative for Germany, AfD's election program, where human-made climate change was described as a political construct. We've seen it with Trump's gold standard for science, where an emphasis was on scientific uncertainty as a factor based on which any regulatory action can be blocked. So we see that uncertainty is a target of political instrumentalization in current times, not only in the US, also in Europe, in Germany, and what is reality today in the US might be reality very soon in Germany. So yeah, it does make a lot of sense right now to look at Germany and the United States in comparison to see different levels of this dynamic right now. And what has been happening with the current US administration is that we've seen cuts on science, which have been a national but also an international concern. And those cuts do complicate collaboration with partners. Also in Europe, access to databases also has been limited, and officials in Europe have warned that if these limitations get more and more intense, that also Europe's dependence on US data on, for instance, climate change and the connecting preparation for extreme weathers or disasters, that this reliance on the US has to be reassessed, and Europe will have to navigate its way and probably away from this high dependence. And what we've seen during the elections in Germany and also here in the United States is that after all these crises that we've been through and society has been through, a successful political approach was providing simple answers to complex questions. That was a way, after all these crises we went through and we're still going through, that kind of seemed to resonate with sometimes even majorities of voters in our countries. So right now, seeing this emerge, I, as a communication scholar looking at uncertainty, quickly realized, okay, this is not really compatible. Uncertainty does make deliberations more complex, does make answers more complex. And right now, society is very open to getting more clear, simple, clear-cut solutions to all the questions there are. And I do understand that that makes a lot of sense, but we'll have to find a way to reconcile that again with science and with its inherent complexities. And that's what I am trying to work on. And I had the chance to work on that here in DC for the past 2 months. And what I really like is the title of this nice article on the upper right. The role of uncertainty is uncertain. And that is actually the reality right now. The body of research dealing with uncertainty and its role right now in the dynamics I have just described is not too broad. So what I tried to do over the past weeks here is to get like a critical angle on investigating the role and function of scientific uncertainty at the transatlantic science policy interface in times of these multiple crises, and looking at socio-scientific issues and shifting agendas. And what I chose to do were informal, conversational, in-depth interviews with intermediaries. I talked about why I made this decision before. And those intermediaries were working or are working in different organizations and fields bridging transatlantic science and policy arenas. Right now, the database for this preliminary first analysis I will speak about today includes 9 interviews. That may not seem, or that may not sound like the biggest sample, but what I tried to do in this study was to get a first very in-depth input on the role of uncertainty and get like deep reflections on it. And for that, I chose the sample to be very narrow with highly specified criteria on who I want to include and who has this extensive experience in policy paired with extensive scientific experience and is right now in a function to bridge these 2 spheres. And that has worked out very well. Before I dive into the 3 main takeaways I got out of this study, I would like to touch upon a few first results and also literature-based results that I got to that I think are an important baseline to consider before diving into the other results. What I would like to speak about first is that taking action, for instance, climate action, in spite of uncertainties, is not a new thing to discuss and not a new thing to happen. In the past 50 years, key protective measures have been taken in the presence of uncertainty. For instance, if we're thinking about the late 1970s, I believe, 1978, the ban on chlorofluorocarbons and aerosol sprays, possibly damaging the ozone layer, was a protective measure that has been taken, although there was present uncertainty. Now that was look very much back, but we're still having those discussions today. So I wanted to mention those are not new. And what is not new either is the notion that preventive action, despite uncertainty, helps to avoid loss of life, large-scale damage, major economic costs. I'm also writing an article on this study right now, and I was having a look at the impacts and the costs that flooding have in the United States, and how many people are affected or potentially affected by flooding because they live in the regions that could be hit by flooding. And also the costs that come from, rebuilding infrastructure. And so alone looking at this, we can see how, preventive action and taking predictions seriously, although they contain uncertainty, may help avoid a lot of those things happening. What we have seen in the interviews is that Germany was considered more open under the current Merz administration to precaution and long-term planning and acting, even when benefits of those measures fall behind the time the current administration is in office. And so for when we look at climate, for instance, we have the precautionary principle that is met with more openness in Germany than obviously it is in the United States. The United States were described as prioritizing more immediate visible outcomes, where the effects become visible during the current administration as a big win. And uncertainty or uncertain socio-scientific issues are not usually the ones tackled with like the quick effects and the quick wins. So that is what has been observed as a baseline in these interviews. But what I was also very, very happy to hear was that not a good or bad, there's not only good and bad people on both sides of the political spectrum, right? Interviewees did mention that there are Republicans, for instance, in Texas, that do support wind energy, despite output uncertainty, where one might say, okay, let's not make Texas, a wind energy powerhouse if we can't exactly predict how the energy output will be, because scientists cannot exactly predict how winds will develop and will happen over the next, I don't know how many years. But still, Texas Republicans advocate strongly also against what the current Trump administration says for wind energy in Texas. So I also wanted to give this not only this notion of black and white, but there's also gray in between that we should not forget about in these discussions. Now, I would like to speak about 3 key perspectives that I am taking away from this study. Those are, the preliminary results. Maybe I will get some more results as the study progresses. But right now, there are, these 3 aspects I would like to touch upon and then also end this presentation with. The first one is perseverance and collaboration within science. The interviews did show that scientific uncertainty can still act as a catalyst, bringing people together to work on those open questions and pressing issues that I started this presentation with. But these effects seem to be limited to the scientific community. They stay inside the scientific community and do not go beyond. So uncertainty, as the interviewees said, contributes to perseverance, collaboration within the US German scientific community, and also within the scientific communities in both countries. And what I found very interesting and what was mentioned very frequently is that the people-to-people ties that we have in Germany and the United States, and I would also say the German-American relationship is also, that makes the US-German relationship very, very special, is the strong people-to-people ties that we have in both our countries. And right now they build this strong backbone that our science diplomacy can fall back on. And right now, science diplomacy and scientific collaboration is carried through this time of science being under strain, especially in the United States, and certain issues not being represented on the national agendas. Those people-to-people ties where people are still committed to generating data that we will never be able to regenerate later, keeping those strains of data collection, going. Those are the people-to-people ties that carry us through this time right now, and we're very fortunate to have those here in our transatlantic relationship. So this is, I would say, a very positive notion. the symbol already gives it away. I will not stick with only positive notions right now. We've seen that at the US science policy interface, scientific uncertainty has become subject to political instrumentalization and has been used to delegitimize science. And that does complicate, policy dialogue with partners on socio-scientific issues, because in other countries, those issues might still be on agendas and science might still inform decision making on those issues, right? And uncertainty does not have the power anymore to unite everyone around a table because everyone has the same high interest in finding solutions. So uncertainty is not only a catalyst for collaboration that stays right now within science, it is a catalyst right now for destructive potentials, instrumentalization, delegitimization, also demonization of science. And that is nothing we should, sugarcoat right now. But what the final point I reached with almost all interviewees was at some point that they came up with a point that it is pragmatism that is needed right now to navigate scientific uncertainty in a crisis-ridden times like in a crisis-ridden time like this. What that means, or a few explanations of what that could mean, brought up by the interviewees, was that this pragmatic approach to uncertainty should emphasize the tangible benefits of national, international collaboration between science and policy on shared uncertainties, because what we can gain is the advancement of national interests, the enhancement of economic outcomes, improvement of safety, and also we can increase competitiveness. What the interviews mentioned often was that scientific collaboration must not be seen as a sign of goodwill or amicability. In an expression of good friendship between two countries, it can be used to strategically advance national interests. And leaving uncertain issues and topics out, that does concern a very, very huge variety of topics and issues where there is competition that one would lose if one would leave out uncertain topics from the agenda. And that is a chance missed, right? And that is also a chance missed to improve safety for the country and the people, resulting in strengthening economy. So that is a whole complex of issues that is being missed out on if scientific uncertainty is the reason to sideline issues and topics completely from science policy and also in general policy dialogue, right? And a very interesting point raised in a few interviews was an opportunity that arises that I think only people like those intermediaries that I had the chance to speak with could identify. Because it was said that where this symbolic political devaluation and instrumentalization of scientific uncertainty clashes with this desire for progress, with this desire for competition, economic benefit, exactly there arises an opportunity to reintroduce uncertainty as a constructive resource rather than just, a justification for dismissing scientific input. And, there's this leeway that the intermediaries identified where there's a chance to say, okay, uncertainty, yes, is unhandy, yes, does make, debates a little more complicated and also makes the communication of the decisions made and the pathways chosen more complicated, because society must be, taken along in that process. And that makes all of it more complicated, but there are gains in that. We can benefit from putting in this extra effort. And one might say, okay, great, let's reframe this uncertainty, but what if policymakers don't want to listen? And that's where I think intermediaries can have a central position as mediators between science and policy, because from the impression that I got, they these intermediaries do have good ties into policymaking communities, good ties into scientific communities, and can take up this bridging function that is, I would say, now more important than ever, right? And what I would like to end with, I would like to come back to, the question that I started with, and also the question you signed up to get answers to from me right now. And I'm trying my best to do that. What I want to say is that to navigate uncertainty in a time like this at the Transatlantic Science Policy Interface, romanticization is definitely not the right approach. Sticking with a romantic image of uncertainty being this one agent binding us all together, tying our interests together, and getting science and policy in the US and Germany around a table to jointly brainstorm on solutions despite this uncertainty or because of this uncertainty. That will not happen in times like these. But also, I would not say, and the interviewees did not say, that deromanticization is the right approach. To just give up and say, okay, uncertainty can do nothing. We are far beyond, like we're with science diplomacy and our science policy interactions, we're at a point that is beyond what uncertainty and good science communication and good, mediation between science and policy arenas can fix. I don't think this is right, because that would mean we just wait it out. And I think that would keep us from harnessing a lot of chances that we have and a lot of potentials that we can have. So we should at least try, right? And what this "we should at least try, right" means is that the essence or the preliminary result I would like to end with today is that the path forward should probably not be deromanticization, should not be romanticization either. It may just be a pragmatization of scientific uncertainty. And how exactly that will play out and what exactly that will mean, I could talk about that for hours, but I think that was a good start into maybe discussing this in the Q&A session or further on. So I would now like to thank you for listening to me, being open to hearing about the results, and now I'm looking forward to the Q&A session, and we'll give it back to Susanne.
Thank you very much, Finja, for this comprehensive report on your time in DC and your findings. While we wait for some more questions to come in, I wanted to ask you about the Coronavirus Inquiry Commission that the German parliament decided to establish in the summer, I believe, and it should have started already. And the commission will involve experts and the public through hearings and consultations and the like. And it will, among other things, examine measures taken to contain the virus, their effectiveness, and the impact on vulnerable groups. And it's reassessing how this crisis was managed and across political structures. And so I wonder how you see this initiative in the context of your project, and also if during your time here, if you saw any similar initiatives in the US. Of course, in the US, or it was during the COVID pandemic, everything was decentralized and different states have different policies. But I wanted to get your impression of this German initiative.
Yep, sure. Yeah, I mean, that is a really good question that does, especially on the US side, tie in with the results I got during the study. First, I mean, looking at Germany, I think the CDU called this initiative an honest analysis of COVID times and what we can learn from it. And I think this already shows how this was worded, how this initiative, has been long overdue. And I think among the German public, there has been the clear call for, a reassessment of how COVID went, and also probably, giving in and saying, okay, not everything went right, and there is a lot that we will have to learn to navigate future crises and do a better job at it. And I think starting this initiative, this Enquete Commission EK in Germany, is one of the ways that paved the way to rebuild or regain trust that has been lost during the pandemic in policymakers and their capacity to handle a pandemic. I mean, that was the first time something in this large of a scale happened. It makes a lot of sense that not everything went smoothly, but I think what really remained open was, an engagement with what can be learned from it, and the clear communication also to the public that policymakers are open to dealing with this right now. And on the US side, I would say that the current administration's way of regaining this trust is not the same one that's been chosen in Germany. This, providing simple answers after having been confronted with confusion from science and policy during the pandemic is their way of showing their voters, now we say which way to go, and will not, make a big confusing thing out of it, interacting with science and making everything blurry. No, we'll say how everything will work out, and we distance ourselves from science and show a clear way and regain, the trust of our voters. And I think that does mirror the differences that we see right now also in the science policy relationship in Germany and the United States. So I think that ties in very, very well. So thank you for bringing this up, Susanne.
Yeah, thank you, Finja. One question that was posted is about the participants in your study here in the US. How aware were your interviewees of scientific uncertainty at the start of your discussion, and was the degree of awareness different depending on the field your interviews worked in?
Yeah, so I mean, starting these conversations, I would say that almost all interviewees I spoke with had some kind of picture in their mind of what scientific uncertainty means for them, and did come in with an inner agenda, I would say, to speak their mind about how they think uncertainty should be handled, and what uncertainty means in their areas of expertise. And what I did notice was that the experts working in the climate area and also health area did perceive uncertainty as a lot more of a risk or a critical factor than people. I had the pleasure to speak with people working, for instance, in space diplomacy, space research, that weren't as concerned about uncertainty and more understood uncertainty as something that is like, part of this whole, space imagination, fascinating aspects about what is not yet known. And the climate and health experts were more like, oh, it's the devastating factor that comes in when we bring scientific information and have to say, okay, it's not 100% certain, and our the policymakers or public may be like, okay, and what should we do with that information then? So definitely uncertainty was viewed differently depending on who I talked to. That was definitely something I witnessed, yes.
And that ties in with another question. Does politicization of uncertainty vary by subject area? Is there more politicization over vaccines compared to cancer research, climate change versus psychiatry? are there some subjects that are more prone to politicization and demonization?
Yeah, so I would say it did. I did see variation across fields. I would say that if the topic overall is a polarizing one, uncertainty will automatically polarize equally, like more. Like we see that in climate change, for instance. But another difference I did notice was that different forms of uncertainty. I briefly talked about that in the more theoretical part of my presentation. Different forms of uncertainty had different levels of how concerning they were perceived by the interviewees depending on the field they were working on. So in climate areas, we had this point of deficient uncertainty, not knowing enough yet to answer a question, where we need, for instance, policymakers need guidance on certain questions for navigating, extreme weather or so. And science says, oh, we cannot clearly predict that yet. We need a few more, we need more data for that. And then policymakers say, okay, that is your job to tell us what to do, and now you're not doing it. So there's a lot of potential for disappointment and uncertainty when it comes to climate, for instance. Also, consensus uncertainty was something that was very present in, health research, climate research. When there's not the science saying answer right, that can cause a lot of it's understandable and requires, that dialogue and exchange between science and policy that should be more intense in the face of uncertainty and not be cut, right? So, yeah, I hope my answer helps a bit.
Yeah, and you mentioned at the end of your presentation the importance of intermediaries. And can you provide some concrete examples of who these crucial intermediaries should be, are? And we're frozen here a little bit.
Oh, I think my internet connection is unstable right now. I don't know if you can hear me still.
I can hear you now.
Okay, that's very good. Would you be so kind to repeat that question, Susanne?
Yes. You mentioned the intermediaries that are important, play an important role as to manage the uncertainty discussion. And the question was, who are these intermediaries? Who are the central mediators that you were thinking of? And I assume you also mean some of the people you talked to would take up that role.
Yes. Yeah. So I don't want to be too precise. Sure. I cannot just name them right now. I would. Fantastic people. But yeah, so I would say the classic intermediary would, for instance, work at a think tank. People at think tanks do have extensive, or often at political think tanks, do have extensive experience, and through previous jobs with governmental work, still have ties in that area. And some of them are, conducting research, have ties into science as well, because they, for instance, work in like fields of energy, for instance, climate fields. Those people could also work at embassies, for instance, at other foundations. We have a lot of them in like the German-American context. And yeah, so there is not this one intermediary that I would describe, but there's like a continuum on which they can be with, the most important thing I would say for intermediaries is to have ties into both areas they are, mediating. And that is that is the most important thing. And in this study, it was also very, very important that they do have an understanding and a focus on transatlantic relations, not only on, climate or energy or space, but also this transatlantic viewpoint to analyze the dynamics, the underlying dynamics. Yeah.
And I assume it would also be important in the US for the intermediaries to be from both sides of the political aisle. And did you were you successful in reaching members of both parties?
Yeah, that's a very, very important point. And I feel like also in Germany, getting people only from one area and also a science positive area is kind of the thing that is also always being said, like preaching to the choir, only talking with people where you're going to be met with a lot of understanding and openness is always problematic. So yes, I also did try to get to speak to people that are not only on the Democratic but also Republican side of things in the United States, and I was in part successful. The majority in this study, and also I feel like that's what the results already give away a little bit, was more from the Democratic spectrum. That is also why this more constructive view on them becoming intermediaries, advocating for uncertainty in science. That's certainly why this positive outlook did happen. But I was surprised at how open also, people from the Republican side were in speaking to me also about uncertainty and also about finding constructive ways for science and policy to collaborate. So, yeah.
Great. And one question is regarding the difference between Germany and the US. Is it really true that political instrumentalization of scientific uncertainty is more prevalent in the US than in Germany? Considering the discourse around the openness to technology in Germany, where some political actors have tried to cast doubt on the likelihood of certain technology trajectories, and the example given is the efficiency of heating systems. And there was this big discussion in the previous German administration about the heat pump, and it didn't go so well, and the public wasn't happy about it, especially about the costs. But even though this discussion happened, even though there's a high degree of consensus in the scientific community.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess another question that I can ask alongside this, given the stagnating economy in Germany and the need for more energy sources, do you think Germany will become more like the US and turn to more immediate outcomes rather than taking a precautionary and long-term approach? And that goes to your comment about how Germany is, and also this commission that was established. Germany is more open to long-term planning, and it's their approach is less transactional, if I may use that term.
Yeah. So I will start with the second question and then move on to the one before. I would say that we will see, or I assume that we will see, a shift towards more immediate outcomes also in Germany. The current program of the administration does emphasize, measurable successes when it comes to, climate measures and action that's being taken. The question would be, when should we be able to measure it? How soon should we be able to measure it? And I would say that this shift towards more immediate outcomes is something I would see for Germany, and also the increasing instrumentalization, where I would agree with this comment that has been very visible also when it comes to, energy discourse. We've seen that also very, very similarly with the AfD and the Trump administration, if we're looking at fossil fuels. The AfD clearly stated that they do not agree with the scientific consensus on, renewables, and the same thing was visible, during COP 30, where that happened without a delegation of the United States. While that was happening, Trump did put emphasis on more intense use of fossil fuels and placed that very high on the also communicative agenda, which is also what we will see, or what we are seeing with the rise of the AfD in Germany. So I think the trend that we're facing, and that's why I find it so relevant and so timely to talk about how to navigate uncertainty, looking at the United States right now, that will be something that is likely to happen, and a trend that is likely to get more intense in Germany, and we see it already right now. So taking this seriously right now and learning from things that happen in the United States could help us in Germany to navigate future challenges that may be coming very soon. Yeah.
And to one of your recommendations, pragmatism. Mm-hmm. And pragmatization of science, using scientific uncertainty. Can you give some example of what that pragmatic approach would look like concretely?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I would go back to the flooding example, because I feel like that is an example that would be of interest for people and policymakers in Germany as well as in the United States, because we experience this at U.S. coast right now. In Germany, we had it with cities near rivers. We had that with the big Ahrtal, a tragedy that happened in Germany. So floods are a socio-scientific issue that should be of interest in German American publics, and also among policymakers. And this pragmatic approach that was suggested by the interviewees, at least how I understand it, would now see this potential that we could unleash if we take protective measures, although predictions about floods may not be very concrete, and science cannot say this area will be flooded in this year, so take this and that measure and we'll get through it safely. Science says, okay, it is likely that this area will experience flood, and making sure to policy ways and with the respective measures, protect this area from getting flooded the best way we can, would help us to protect our economic system from having to rebuild a whole area that has been flooded, and also protect people from losing their what they own, using their lives, using the ecosystem they live in. And I think this is the pragmatic approach. And also when it comes to other areas such as wind energy and other areas that are more oriented towards competition and agendas of dominance that are maybe pursued in certain countries. Pragmatism would mean to make clear that acting despite uncertainty would help to get ahead in competition, and to help achieve dominance in areas where that is on the agenda. And I think that would be one example I would give for, or the interviews. That was not my brilliant idea. It was the interviews that raised those examples. Yeah.
And maybe a final question about uncertainty as a catalyst for transatlantic collaboration. And you mentioned the South Carolina-Germany joint declaration. Is it Germany as a whole that signed this declaration with the state of South Carolina, or was it was it a Bundesland, a state in Germany? Mm-hmm. Do you know? Or And my question is basically, are there more such initiatives? I mean, we know at the local level, at the state level, there's a lot of communication and collaboration to begin with. And you mentioned the solid foundation between people to people exchanges in Germany and the US. But is there more willingness given the scientific uncertainty or on issues on these socio-scientific crises than before? Would you see that there would be an opportunity or willingness to engage more with the other side?
So that is a difficult question. During the interviews, we had these more constructive views emerging, and when I did ask for examples that we can, still hold on to in the future that will keep up our German-American collaboration, not on the people-to-people level, but on this higher level, so backed by the government and the administration, there were less examples raised and more concern voiced, which does make a lot of sense when we look at the cuts that science experienced. And one project that we discussed in the interviews that will, as far as we know right now, will also go into a next round in 2028, and that has been a stable German-American effort since the early 2000s, I believe, is the GRACE satellite project, where Germany and the United States have been and will be, hopefully, collecting global mass shift data from space using satellites, that are a collaboration between Germany and the United States. And we've seen that in the United States, there have been cuts to climate space science as well. But the people I spoke to from the area of space diplomacy, which is a very fascinating area, I have to say, I dove into this field for the first time for this project, and I would love to stay in that area because it was so fascinating. It was said that German-American ties, especially on that space topic, are still very much intact, and we'll, at least for the next years, we'll still be able to generate crucial climate data for not only Germany and the United States, but also for the rest of the world to help make climate predictions. And that's at least something positive we can hold on to. So we'll see how that develops, and I will keep my fingers crossed for continued collaboration on that.
Well, thank you, Finja, for this optimism and this very interesting project. And I think we all, despite all the uncertainty, we are concerned about all of these issues, and I think everybody has a stake in working towards finding results and answers. So thank you, and thank you to our audience for participating, for the questions. I do want to thank the German Academic Exchange Service, the DAAD, for providing their generous support to this fellowship, and we are continuing to strengthening the transatlantic relationship and the network. And we can also look forward to Finja's report, which will be published in the next few weeks on our website. Thank you. Please join us again for another webinar, and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.